Well, hello everybody and welcome to Jeff's Baking Blog. Today I'm going to be making some mini festive Christmas cakes. This is from a recipe from Marks and Spencer. Now, I did an introduction earlier, but having worked on the recipe a bit, I realised I need to redo the introduction to explain that on the Marks and Spencer recipe, it says it makes 10 to 12 mini cakes or 1 8-inch square cake which you can cut into small pieces. However, they don't give any indication of the size of the mini cakes, and I thought I had a pan which was about the right size, but in actual fact that pan has smaller loaves than the Marks and Spencer's ones could have been, so I've adapted the recipe for those smaller sizes and then to make 2 larger cakes. So I have a 10-hole pan which has 10 rectangles in it of 3 inches by 1 3/4 inches, and then I'm going to use 2 small loaf pans which are 3 inches by 5 inches, and so the batter that I'm going to make in the video is enough for those 10 smaller cakes and the 2 larger ones. So with that said, it's actually quite a straightforward recipe, but it makes a rich fruit cake which is spiced, and then there's going to be some marzipan and some fondant icing on the top. So nothing very difficult. You can buy the fondant icing. I've made my own, but I'm not showing that. I've already made that, simply because a lot of people like to buy their fondant icing. So with that said, I start off by preheating my oven to 160 degrees Celsius. That's 140 Celsius with a fan, 320 Fahrenheit, and I've greased my loaf pans and floured them. I've actually used baking spray which has flour in them. So with that said, I'll go on to the ingredients. And for this I have 500 grams, which is 1.1 pounds of mixed fruit, which I have soaked in a combination of hot water and brandy for a while, and then I've drained that liquid off, but they're still sort of moist or wet basically, but I have drained the liquid off. I have 175 grams, which is 1 cup plus 3.5 tablespoons, based on scooping packed flour into a 250 milliliter cup of plain flour. I have 175 grams, 12.5 tablespoons of softened unsalted butter. I have 50 grams, which is half a cup of ground almonds, and I have 50 grams, half a cup of flaked almonds, 100 grams, half a cup of dark brown sugar, 50 milliliters, 2 tablespoons plus 1 teaspoon of golden syrup, 70 grams, 3.5 tablespoons of black treacle, or you could use molasses. I have 3 medium eggs, which would be large in the USA, and I'm going to lightly beat those before I add them into my mixture. I have the juice from half an orange, which is 50 milliliters, 3 tablespoons plus a teaspoon, and into that I've also put the zest of that orange. I have 4 grams, 2 teaspoons of mixed spice, a pinch of salt, and in here will be, in fact I'll do that now, 30 milliliters, 2 tablespoons of milk. And so that's all the ingredients, and so the first thing we need to do is to make our batter basically, or make the cakes. I'll do the ingredients for the icing and the topping of the cakes once the cakes are made and they've cooled down. And to start off, I'm going to put my flaked almonds and my orange juice and zest into the mixed fruit, and I'm just going to stir that around a little bit, get that mixed in. And I'll set that aside, and then I'm going to mix my mixed spice, salt and ground almonds into my plain flour. And you could sift this, but I don't think it needs to be sifted particularly. I think the Marks and Spencer's recipe says to sift it. So that's that. And then we need to get to work on the cake batter. So I'm going to put my softened butter into a bowl with my dark brown sugar, and I'm going to mix that for a couple of minutes until it's sort of nice and fluffy. So I've mixed that, and that's quite well done, and I'm going to put my golden syrup and my black treacle into that mixture. And I'm going to mix it again until it's fully combined. And then I'm going to add the egg, and I'm going to do it gradually, mixing the whole time. And I've got that mixed through, so I'm just going to set that aside for a moment because I forgot an ingredient and I just realised it. I also need half a teaspoon, which is 2 grams of baking powder, and I'm going to sprinkle that onto the flour, and I'm just going to give that an extra stir through, and that's okay. So then I'm going to put that into my wet mixture, and I'm going to mix that together, and I'm not going to use the mixer for this. I'm going to stir it by hand until it's fully incorporated. And as it's almost incorporated, I'm going to add in all my fruit and almonds and orange juice. and my milk as well. And I'm going to continue mixing until I've got that all combined into a nice thick cake batter. And I've got that mixed quite nicely. So I need to divide that into each of my loaf pans really. So, and for ease, I'm going to weigh the first couple so that I can see how much to put in each one. So I'm going to take an amount and put it in and press it down. So I'm actually putting 90 grams or thereabouts into each of my pans. And the reason I'm being less specific than I would like is that Marks and Spencer didn't tell me the size of the pans they were using. So I'm going to fill them up to about that level. So what I've done is I've filled two mini loaf pans, but which are much larger than the ones I was working with. These mini loaf pans are 5 inches by 3 inches, which I think is about 11 centimetres by 6 to 7 centimetres. And these are 3 inches, 7 centimetres by 1 3/4 inches, which is 5 centimetres. And I'm going to put those into the oven, and I'll bake the smaller ones for about 30 minutes until a skewer comes out clean, and the larger ones I'll bake for about 40 minutes until the skewer comes out clean. And once it's come out clean, I'm going to take them out of the oven, leave them in those moulds for about 5 minutes, then I'll turn them out onto a wire rack, and when they've cooled down completely I'll come back and we'll go on to the ingredients for putting the marzipan and the icing on the top. And the remaining ingredients for the marzipan and the icing to go on the top are as follows. I'm going to use 250 grams, which is 9 ounces of marzipan. You can use the white marzipan or the yellow golden marzipan, whichever you prefer. I'm going to use 250 grams, 9 ounces of fondant icing, 200 grams, 1 2/3 cups of icing sugar, half an egg white, a medium egg white, about half. Now, because this is going to go into some icing for piping, and it's not being cooked, I'm actually using a powdered egg white, and I've mixed that up and taken half of that mixture. You can use egg whites, but I prefer, because the egg whites aren't necessarily pasteurised, I prefer in this instance to use the egg white powder. I think you could also just use water, but the recipe calls for egg white, so that's what I'm using. I have some pink food colouring, and I'm going to use just a couple of drops of that to colour the icing which is going to be piped. And then I have 40 grams, 2 tablespoons of apricot jam. So that's all of those ingredients. I baked my small cakes for 30 minutes and I tested them with a skewer, which came out clean. So I took them out of the oven. I left the larger ones in for another 12 minutes, so 42 minutes in all, and tested those with a skewer, which came out clean, so I took those out as well. Now I've only got one of those two larger ones left, because as soon as they came out of the oven I took one round to my niece, who was in dire need of fruit-filled sustenance, so she had one of them. She'll have the other one later today as well. So I'll show you what those cakes look like now. So as you can see, this is the larger one, and it baked up very well, and the small ones baked up well as also. So the next thing to do is to work on our marzipan to go on the top. And I've taken my marzipan and just kneaded it gently to soften it a little bit, and I've floured it. Sorry, I haven't floured it. I put some icing sugar on it and on my board, and I'm going to roll that out to a thickness of about 2 millimeters, which is very thin, and that's then going to be cut out to go onto the top. I have some guides here which are 3 millimeters, so once I've hit those guides I'll remove them and just make it a little bit thinner. And that's probably thin enough. I'm going to simply score the marzipan, and if some of the top of the cake comes off because they're nice and moist now, it doesn't matter, and I'm going to cut that out. So I'm going to pick that up, and I actually had to join it together because I made the cut slightly wrong, but it was fine. And then I'm going to take some warmed apricot jam and brush that on the top of the cake, and I'm going to place my marzipan on the top to cover it, basically. Just like that. That's good. And then I'll set that to the side and do the same with the remainder. So I've put the marzipan on my remaining cakes, and I'm going to roll out the fondant icing and do the same with that. Now if this cracks a little bit, it doesn't matter, I can use a little bit of water to keep it together. And with it rolled out quite thin, I'm going to take a piece and put that on top of the cake. But before I do that, I'm going to brush the marzipan with some hot water. That's going to just help the icing to stick. Like that. And again I'm going to do the same with the remainder. So I've put the icing on my cakes now, and I'm going to set those to one side, and with some diffidence, I have to say, I'm going to try to make the icing to pipe on the top. And for that the instructions say whip the egg white a little bit, so I'll do that. And it says continue whipping and put in the icing sugar, so I'm going to do that a bit at a time. I think if you need to add more egg white, you can. And you want to get this to the stage where if you pipe it, it leaves a ribbon. And I've got that quite thick, but it's pipeable. Now I haven't used all my icing sugar, and I'm not worried about that because I'm not going to pipe as elaborately as the Marks and Spencer's ones. They had 2 lines going down, 2 lines going across, and a bow. Well, if you know what I'm like at piping, that's never going to work. So I'm just going to put a little drop of gel in, and I'm going to stir that around and see how pink that gets. I think I can have one more of the same amount. Like that. That should be enough, I think. It's just to colour the icing a little bit. And then I'm going to put that into an icing bag, and I'm not worried about how much I've made because if I need to make some more I can. And with that in the bag I'm going to push it down towards the point. I'm going to cut the very tip off. I don't need wide ribbons, but just a little bit. And then I'm going to take a cake and I'm going to just pipe a line on and another one like that, and maybe in the other direction as well. Like that. Now they could be pinker I think, but that's fine for me. I could have made my piping icing a little bit pinker, but I'm not very good with colours, so it looked pink to me, and it is pink, but it's not as pink as I could have made it, but it's still fine. So that's what they look like, and I'm going to cut one open, or cut one in, a piece off, and I'll show you the inside like that, and I'll have a taste of the smaller piece. Very, very good. The flavour of the cake evokes those Christmas flavours with the mixed spice and all those fruits. And then the marzipan is also traditional on a Christmas cake, those with royal icing. So that enters into the situation as well. And then that fondant icing, which for my preference is a little bit sweet, but these days people enjoy fondant icing. It seems to be more popular than the royal icing. So this isn't a difficult recipe. It takes a bit of time if you've got the patience, and it tastes very, very good. And as I said, these would be ideal for giving as gifts to people, particularly if you know some people who maybe live alone and wouldn't go to the trouble of making a Christmas cake, or even perhaps buying one. A small one of these would suit them very well. So that's going to be it for this recipe. I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you have, please give me the thumbs up below and click to subscribe to my YouTube channel. In the top right hand corner of the screen there'll be an eye that you can click on, and that will take you to a link for the recipe, and I'll put a link below the video as well, and I'll be back with another recipe in the very near future. So until then, happy baking.